Clare Gallagher, welcome back to the Free Trail Podcast.
Thank you so much, Devo. It's really sweet to see you and catch up. And
likewise.
Yeah, it's kind of hilarious to just be basically having a public catch up.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I said to Claire before we got started here. It's like, I have very few notes. I have no idea what you're up to. So let's just do this long form personal friendship catch up, and hopefully it's entertaining to a trail running audience. But yeah, how long have we been trying to set this up for via text message? It's been like 3 months probably. I was like, hey.
think so, because I feel like maybe you reached out right when I was about to go to Bhutan in October, and I was so stoked you reached out, and then you took like a tech hiatus of sorts, right?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually so curious about that, because I was like, oh, this is sick. Like, you're automatic. I mean, you texted me back, but like, you know, what was that?
Well, let's come back to that in a little bit. First and foremost, we got to catch back up with Claire. And I mean, it's been forever. Last time we talked, I think you were still working at Patagonia, but you were thinking about going to grad school. So maybe just to start, like, tell me how you're spending your time right now. Like, what's occupying your mental and physical energy?
Yeah, I think it was the last time we talked. I should have looked it up. But for some reason, I'm actually remembering that I think I was wearing this exact same fleece. Was I?
I don't remember. It's been forever.
It's like, I'm just over here wearing the same clothes. Okay, dude, nothing's changed. I haven't showered in 3 years. I think I had ran Black Canyon. So it probably was 2021.
Yeah.
Like February. So almost 3 years exactly. Yeah. And things are really good. I'm a third year PhD student, and I shouldn't laugh when I say it. There's nothing really to laugh about. It's just like it's sweet. Like, being in school is such a privilege. I really am a fan so far of the runner academic combo.
Yeah.
Yeah. It suits my need for constant stimulus pretty well.
Yeah.
And like living in different worlds, because it's fun to be, in a room with scientists that like don't care about running, and some of them do.
Yeah. They don't have any idea that they have a Western States champion in their laboratory with them.
Definitely not. And
it's probably pretty liberating, especially for a person of your, sort of disposition, personality type.
You're sweet. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's good to like have, be expanding my interests and just learning a lot. But yet in the past year or so, I injured my back at World Championships in Austria, in Innsbruck in 2023. And I was basically out for a year. And I know you've dealt with, serious injuries in your career, and it's just, I'm 33 now. It's one of these things that it was super, super real. Like, I basically just like jumped over a rock wall and like biffed it. Like in the first hour of the race. And then I walked it in. Being worlds, like, I think if it had been a different caliber of race, I probably would have DNF'd. But I'm like,
that's right. I was talking to somebody about this recently, where you were like close to missing the cutoff at the World Championship.
Oh yeah, like I thought I was missing like 6 cutoffs. Like, I'm walking, right? I'm basically like walking backwards. And my dad and my brother happened to be there. Not happened, like they were there to watch me. And okay, God bless them. But they're like, Claire, like, you're not making the cutoffs. Like, no way. Like, we'll pick you up at the next one, but like, you're not going to make it. And I'm like, shoot, like, this is so embarrassing. Like, this sucks. Like, I'm representing our country. Like, I was like supposed to do well for the women. Like, we had a really good women's team, and I just totally shot the bed. And then I would show up to the aid stations, and it's like, yeah, so you're like 30 minutes under. So keep going. I'm like, what the I was like happy, because I'm like, but I'm like, Eric, and to my dad, Eric is my brother. I'm like, you guys are so wrong. like I keep making the cutoffs. But this was a long time ago. Now it feels like so much, like, really exciting things have happened in the world.
Well, so where are you? Like, what do you consider the main thing right now? It's one thing that I'm really interested about because, like, obviously you've had a phenomenal running career. You intentionally sort of like, it feels like keep a distance from at least like the hardcore center of the community. But like you've done so much and obviously you're on this path with your PhD program. Like what is the main thing for Claire right now?
Well, I guess it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm being really honest. No, it's honestly like kind of a day to day, week to week, month to month. Like right now being January, I'm not running 15 hours a week. You know, I'm getting in those kind of brutal winter miles on the roads and trying to get fit. And I still think those are some of my favorite hours of the week for sure. Like I have an amazing crew of women I run with in Boulder. Like we've got some Olympic triathletes we're getting into trail running. Like me and Abby Levine and another girl, Catherine, we ran in college with. It's just been like really fun. I'm feeling really rejuvenated by the women I run with. It's fun. Like to see someone get into trail running is just so fun. So I would say like if I'm talking about running like now, I'm like most stoked on that.
Yeah.
But then when I'm like trying to publish a paper right now on some like methods to age fish bones, then I'm like focused on that. You know?
Yeah. So it still feels though as if both aspects of your life are equally important, it seems like, because I mean, one of the things that's hard to deduce because it's hard to follow you given, you know, your lack of an Instagram profile at this point is like to what extent you are serious about running. Obviously you've said you've been injured, which has kept you off the race course for the most part in the last 12 months or so, but it feels like the passion and dedication is still there as it relates to running.
Yeah. And I exactly. I guess why I even went back to like my walking it in at Worlds a year and a half ago is because that sort of, I almost was like, I know we joke about this kind of like, I'm ready to retire, you know, like kind of all the time. And I had been kind of kidding about it around that time. And then to get injured and then to realize like, oh no, I am like so far from calling this in. Like, you know, like even though our community like is spread across the country, like I freaking love our trail runners. Like it's so fun to reconnect. I love going to races. So I'm not as public about it. And if anything, it just feels right. It's like a bit of an evolution for me.
Yeah. It also feels like you can enjoy it as a discipline, as a practice, rather than as a job in the way that a lot of the professional athletes in the sport have to.
Totally. I feel super
especially in this modern era.
Exactly. I mean, what athletes are expected these days. And I know, you know, you've discussed it, you know, at length and I'm talking about it just with friends, you know, in Boulder and just hearing of all the brands cutting X, Y, and Z. It's crazy. And then to think, wow, now ultra runners have to be influencers at the same time. Yeah. Like what?
All right, so
crazy.
I want to talk about that a lot with you too, because it feels like you're carving a new path or at least exhibiting a different model for how to engage with the digital world. And we've talked about this on the podcast in the past. It's been a while since you've been off of Instagram. But before we get to it, you mentioned that you're 33 now, which I didn't realize. And 33 is like an auspicious year. You know, biblically as it relates to a lot of, you know, different religions too. Like I think Siddhartha was 33 when he sat under the Bodhi tree.
Oh, that's
I know
cool.
For me, when I was 33, it was like a powerful and actually a difficult year in my life.
How old are you?
I'm 38 now, Claire.
Okay,
I'm turning
nice.
39 in a couple months.
Let's go.
2 months from today, actually.
Amazing.
What does it feel like an important moment in your life in any way? Does that resonate with you at all? Definitely.
I'm not super auspicious, but I'm like, okay, I'm not getting younger and it's fine. I've been really enjoying, I feel like maybe 3 years ago, I made some pretty major changes in my life and I'm pretty proud of the risks I've taken, like as a pro athlete, right? To like be like, yo, I'm kind of trying to carve a new path. And it's fun though too, to be getting older and to still be like in it in a way, in a different way. Granted, like both of us, like we were babies, Dylan, when we were on the North Face together. We were babies.
You were more of a baby, but yeah, I get your point.
It's so good, you know, and so much has changed. Neither of us are on the North Face anymore. And, but man,
anyway, I just thought I would bring that up because when I was 33, that was an important year for me. It was for my brother too. It was for my mom. And as I've talked to, other people in my life, it feels like a moment in life where you actually are officially exiting youth and into quote unquote middle age, when life gets more serious, you have more baggage, more responsibilities, and where you really are trying to ascertain for yourself, who am I in the world and what impact do I want to have, in a way that you're not really considering, even in your mid or late 20s. At least that was my experience. Yeah,
I would agree with that. And I know, like I told you before we started recording, that I'm moving in with my partner, and like we're super committed. I'm like, oh wow, like that alone, to be like, sure, I want to spend the rest of my life with someone, is like really a huge deal for me. And I mean, it impacts everything. It's like the most fun in many ways part of life. So I would say it's already setting off to be an auspicious year for sure.
Okay. All right. So let's come back to this digital conversation. We talked about this last time you were on the show, I recall, and I think it was pretty fresh at that point that you had stepped away from Instagram. So it's been probably 3+ years. Is that right?
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. How has that been? Has there ever been a temptation to plug back into the dopamine factory?
Yeah, it's been fascinating. So I think I spent roughly about a year where I still had my account. I just like scrubbed it essentially of like photos, and didn't use it for a year. And then when I was injured with my back, I was pretty depressed. Honestly, I wasn't able to exercise like at all with my SI problems. And I had this moment where I was just like, this is not serving me. And I will admit, I think I made a rash decision at the time to be like, I didn't like ask my best friends. Like my best friends are like, oh dude, you should have asked us. like you could have sold it or something, where I was just like in my house and I was like, delete. And it's like, are you sure? Like you can't get this back. And I'm like, delete.
So it's like the official flush it down the toilet.
I think I saved my photos, but it's not like I've like looked at them.
And so for the listeners, your account probably had 50,000 followers at that point, something like that?
Yeah, 45.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
like a not insignificant amount. Like you can leverage that type of an audience to do interesting things in the world. Like that is a fairly dramatic thing to fully delete.
Totally. It was. And I was already in grad school. And so I think I wasn't running. So I was like, it definitely was a tumultuous time and questionable of like whether I had the right clarity to do that. Yeah. I mean, especially because like I was making money, we can make money off these platforms with decent sized followings. But I really feel like for me personally, and I'm not speaking against like any athletes, it's like crazy what athletes are demanded of, and even just to get media out, like your podcast. But like for me, I took the risk of like, I think my sponsors are still going to sponsor me. God bless them, Patagonia and La Sportiva. I am really, really disturbed at like the teenage data of like teenagers becoming so depressed, kids. I mean, Andrew Solomon just wrote a piece in the New Yorker a couple months ago just about teenage suicide.
Harmony just read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I haven't read it yet, but she was very disturbed by it.
Harmony read it. Yeah. Yeah, phenomenal. Jonathan Haidt is like has been on it for years. And I literally thought, okay, at the time, yeah, that would have been, I guess, like 3 years ago, roughly, already had built enough of a platform. I had committed sponsors. And I thought, why not try this? Because there's surely a 23-year-old trail runner out there who's like, one, either really bad at social media, but a really good runner and like great in person and charismatic, or someone who also feels similarly to me, or maybe both, of like, I struggle with the values with supporting these tech platforms that like put creativity in a box, and capitalize on our data. And, since when did trail running have to be reliant on Meta?
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
And it's getting harder and harder too. Like when you and I probably got on Instagram, it was good enough to just post a photo every once in a while. Now you have to like craft these, you have to have like an in-house cinematographer in order to like make these TikTok style reels or whatever. And
to be like,
just to be relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. I really feel for everyone who's part of that system and machine. And I know for me personally, it's the best decision I've made. So and I hope others can like find a balance. Like Len Nessifer, who's he's this hilarious. Do you know Len Nessifer?
No.
He's hilarious. I'm pretty sure his like meme account is called like Sonoran Avalanche Center. He's based in Tucson, Arizona. He's this hilarious Navajo dude. And yeah, he's been writing a lot on his Substack about social media and the outdoor industry. Really smart dude. Yeah, okay, you would like him, Dylan.
So perfect segue. Yeah, I'll look him up. I'm excited to check that out a little bit, but it's a perfect segue to talk about how you are engaged with the digital world, because as we were talking about, it's hard for me to just like keep track of what's going on with Clare, except for as a subscriber to your newsletter, I occasionally get a little glimpse into your life. And it's funny because you also do that in a different way, seems like you do everything in your life. And most of the time when I get an inbox delivery from Clare Gallagher, it's like some beautiful poem, not some long form prose newsletter about how your training's going. So, or your like environmental advocacy work or anything like that. So tell me about your interest in poetry.
Yeah, it really came seemingly out of nowhere this summer. When I was back healthy, I had this rebirth. I was running so much just west of Boulder, so along the divide. And I felt really inspired by other creatives I was around. My dear friend, Brendan Davis, who like lives in Brooklyn, but kind of lives with me. He's a photographer, great trail running photos. He told me to read The Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
Oh my God, my favorite book.
Wait, really?
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
So good. Yeah. I feel like it could have been 200 pages, not 400, but yeah.
No way.
Oh my gosh.
Should have been 800.
It's so good. Yeah.
Do you ever listen to his podcast?
No.
Oh, it's like my favorite podcast too. Okay. You got to check it out. It's so good.
That's good to know. I feel like he's an interesting example because I didn't know about him. He's a renowned music producer, right? And I Google him and I'm like, oh, he's really interesting because he's protecting his creativity outlets and the way he makes creativity, even though he's super, super famous and he just like has boundaries on all these like tech platforms, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's not engaging on like Instagram or Twitter. He just like has 1 million followers, or something like that.
Yeah.
And anyways, so I feel like that's really cool and inspiring, but the book itself was rad. And I was like, oh yeah, I felt like it was worth trying something different in terms of how I'm communicating with the world. And I will say my mom sends my brothers and I a poem every single morning.
Huh.
She's been doing this for probably like a decade now.
Via email?
She texts it to us.
And it's something that she's written or it's somebody else's?
It's something she's like picking out of a book.
Okay.
And I just have to think that there's something there, because I've never been like, oh, I'm a poet, but there's got to be some osmosis there. It's like my mom's way of showing love. It's really beautiful. And then I started dating my boyfriend, and he's just like teaching me so much about poetry in ways I've never understood. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love writing poetry. And then I'm just putting it on my, on my website, which is like a millennial angst blog. It's just like, I feel like there's no other way to describe it. Like, I'm just such a millennial. Like, I'm like the peak millennial age. I'm just like going through transitions,
33 years old.
Yeah.
It's the auspicious moment in life.
Also, let's be real. Who wants to read more than I'm like, people surely, like, I feel self-conscious. I won't lie, Dylan. Like, as I've gotten off a lot of social media, I still use Strava and I love Strava, but I feel self-conscious about asserting myself into people's lives. Like, I'm like, why do people care what I have to say?
Because you're Clare Gallagher. So tell me about like the process or the practice of writing. Is it sort of like you have a time during the day that you write, or is it only when the inspiration strikes?
It's more an inspiration thing. Yeah. Often when I'm struggling to understand my emotions around something, whether positive, like feeling like overwhelming love and connectivity with my best friends or my partner or my family, or like not understanding the corporate world, like something I wrote recently that I'll probably put on my website is just about like the struggle of corporate America. It's like sad. I commend you, Dylan. Like, you are out here hustling. You're like a small business owner. Like, that's hard. And dude, like, it's not lost on me.
Yeah.
Like, I have mad respect.
Yeah.
For that.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I like couldn't sleep a couple nights ago, which is very unlike me. And I'm like, oh, I'm just like mad at the corporate man. Like, this is bullshit. Like, my friends are just being like, strung left and right by their employers, just, and, having to keep health insurance. I'm like, this is sad.
Yeah.
So, I'll just jot some stuff down about that. I'm actually taking a creative writing poetry class at CU Boulder, and I've been trying for years to get into like any MFA class, because I'm actually like,
really,
and I have this amazing professor, Rajiv Mohabir, and I'm like, this is what I want to do.
Cool.
It's really cool writing about the environment.
So after your PhD, you go get an MFA. Right? My brother did an MFA program.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I could connect you guys, and you could connect on American literature and poetry and things like that.
Yeah. Like
creative writing.
Yeah. Okay. So fiction.
Yep.
Yeah. That's sweet.
Anyway. So in one of your recent posts, you talked about, I mean, this was a little bit like maybe in the summer, but you talked about going back to Princeton for your 10th anniversary and receiving an award. I'd love for you to brag about yourself a little bit. What award did you receive? Some alumni, recognition from the University of Princeton, not to brag, Oh
my God. It's funny. I have a complicated relationship with my 4 years at Princeton, as I think a lot of people might. But especially because I was recruited to run there. Like, it's a D1 running program. They had a really good women's team right before I got there. So like my class and the ones around me were kind of recruited to continue that. Like, the girls a couple years before I got there got 4th at cross country nationals, which is just rare for Ivy Leagues to be able to kind of do that. Mm-hmm. And I shat the bed like really hard at Princeton. Like, I did not contribute in any way that I was expecting to contribute. I was perpetually injured. I was like thinking that in order to be fast, I should just like not eat. And it's nothing about like, I actually think my coach was really great. And like have nothing bad to say about him. It just was like, I was a mess. I was a hot mess.
Yeah.
And
you weren't the fully formed, very mature 33-year-old Clare Gallagher that we see today.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, actually, this is like kind of fun. I don't know. I feel like I told this to someone recently. I was a senior and I ran all 4 years. Like I didn't quit the team, but and I was reading Outside Magazine, and I'm a major procrastinator. It's actually like a huge, huge problem in my life. But I had like lots of work to do, and I was reading Outside Magazine and about Rory Basio winning UTMB,
right?
And I was just like, oh my God, this woman is amazing. Like I want to do this. This is the type of running I want to do. And it kind of planted that seed. I think it's something beautiful about print media.
Uh-huh.
And I hope that, college seniors around the country are still experiencing that somehow, where they just like hear a story of someone doing something amazing in trail and ultra and be like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah. So anyways, I was not good. I've definitely like been running like more than anyone else.
As an alumni, you mean?
Yeah.
So what was the award? Was it just like Clare Gallagher has done all these amazing things in trail and ultra running?
Well, what's funny, it's an alumni award in honor of my coach who is still alive, and he's great. He started the women's program back in like the 70s, and he's now retired. I mean, that's basically like all it is. And I guess it was like in service to the sport of running, like someone who's still been involved into the sport of running. Cause there's a lot of college runners who don't, who like stop running after college. But the funny part is like track people do not understand trail and ultra. Like literally my coach is like, so wait a sec, like what? Like what distance are we talking?
The Western States 100 meters? What is this?
And then like the few people who kind of follow our sport are like, dude, like those are some big wins you've had. And I'm like, oh there's something to be said for how like siloed running can be, especially when you're in that like New Jersey, like
academic and track environment.
Yeah. Like all that matters is like New Jersey track. And I respect that. I'm like, that's cool to have deep, deep knowledge, which I don't have about like track and collegiate running. But actually it's funny because Abby Levine and I like hope to start this podcast so we can compete with you. Yeah, we're going to go to battle. We're going to battle with you.
Cease and desist. Get off my lawn.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's cool, need to sue us.
I mean, good for you. Go back for the 10th, reunion, 10th year reunion of your graduation, receive an award, and in some way it brings your underperformance from your collegiate career full circle, and you can show everybody just how triumphant you were in the long run.
Well, yeah, maybe not even triumphant. I felt like it was a win for my love of running.
Yeah, because
I think that was highly questioned. I think everyone questions that, especially as a collegiate runner. Like, do I love this? And especially like being recruited, right? I'm like, okay, why? And then what's been beautiful is I do have these amazing teammates who've stayed my best friends who are still running. And like a couple of them, like Marissa, Sarah, they do trail running and it's just so fun. It's like, man, we were out there like,
that's the best. College sports are the best. And this is actually a perfect segue to start talking about your running a little bit. Cause I remember, and I haven't revisited the last episode that we recorded together, but it was after Black Canyon 2021. And you said something to the effect of that you didn't see yourself racing professionally for a long time, something to that effect. But like you were unashamed about professing your undying love for the sport. And there's a tension there, right? There's sort of like a contradiction there. So, you being somebody who has a love of the game, but also maybe like, ambivalence or reluctance to, embrace the trappings of being a full professional athlete, as evidenced in some part also by your abandonment of Instagram. Talk about that. Like, am I touching on a tension there that's interesting?
Wow. I feel like I could maybe like give you my therapist's phone number.
No, but it's interesting, right? Because like, if I were you, if I have won Leadville, Western States, CCC, Black Canyon, yada, 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 dude, I would have trophies behind me everywhere. I would bring a Cougar trophy with me. Like, it'd be sitting on the dashboard of my truck. And in today's day and age, you can capitalize. Like, you could coast off just that, let alone everything you accomplish in the future. And yet you like intentionally keep a distance from that stuff in a way that I think is interesting, that I think the audience would find interesting.
That's really astute. I think it's a constant tension around, in some ways, ego, right? For me, like if I'm leading or living my life, like ego first, I become the version of myself I'm not that stoked on. And it's not to say that that's like, you know, anyone in our sport who is working based on their accomplishments, right? Like to some degree, all of us are always. It's just a personal thing for me. Like I do better and I'm more stoked just in the minutiae of day to day. Like, like that's why I'm just so stoked right now, just because I have this like influx of fresh energy in the girls I'm running with. And that's like all I really care about. Like, yeah, it's fun to think about the big wins and all the good times we've had. And yeah, I'm not trying to diminish them, but it's also just not super interesting for me to live or to like build my career fully in the outdoor industry, essentially.
Yeah.
Like when you include when I think about all there is of running, like truly as a sports fan, I know you're like the ultimate sports fan. You and Abby Levine actually should have a podcast together. And that's why I'm so excited because she's such a dear friend and so smart when it comes to running. I get so energized about knowing what's current, like what's actually happening right now, you know, and then thinking about the past or what I've done is like, it's cool, but yeah, I mean, it's just not for me. Like ultimately I want a career in conservation after I'm done with school. Like that's what I would hope like to leave a mark on is like just protecting a ton of land and water.
Yeah.
Like that's deeply what I dream of and to write more. And I hope I'm still running.
That's really interesting. And I'm sure it was sort of an evolving realization that you have, but you know, especially if you think about the modern era of trail and ultra running, especially with the resume that you have, you could milk that for a long time and it would probably be more glamorous and easier to do that. In other words, deleting your Instagram and going to grad school is like a much harder way to make a living.
Totally. Financially, it was really dumb. Yeah. It was bad. It was a bad decision. Bad. Yeah.
But you don't regret it, it sounds like.
I don't, because like I'm stoked when I wake up. Like I don't have, and I think I struggle with this way more than the average one of our peers of just like, fuck, like I gotta like, you know, curate X, Y, and Z and deal with comments and you know, and put myself out there for this company that like all they do is take. Like that's just, I think existentially a lot, and it's kind of to my detriment. And so that's why it wasn't worth it for me. It ended up just not being worth it.
What do you mean you think existentially a lot? Just like about what is my effort and my image and likeness contributing to type questions?
Yeah, exactly. And what are the minutes of my day? How am I spending my time?
Yeah.
What am I thinking about? And I got disturbed with the amount of hours of my week that I was essentially just giving what I perceived to a tech platform that I like owe nothing.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's a bit existential, right? It's like, okay, well, actually it's like, it's the community, I'm making money, like I'm catching up with my friends, you know, so I see all those positives. But for me, it just was like, okay, I'm kind of going crazy, and I'm thinking about like, what am I going to tell like my future kids? Like, oh, I just like was okay with this, with the way I was building a business and a brand. When I knew all of this evidence, that really, really scares me. For some reason, it's just like, I just like can't unlearn what I've learned about social media and kids. Like, it just scares the crap out of me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. That was really fun to chat about. And I think just the way that you do approach your career, it's noticeably different. And as a friend of yours and a fan of yours, I appreciate it. I like it. And, you know, of course, I am plugged into the dopamine factory, right? Like, I have to be for our business and stuff. And
totally,
you know, again, like no judgment to everybody who, you know, does feed the algorithm more or less, because most people do in this day and age, but it does take a certain level of, I don't know, self-discipline and courage to, you know, fully go the newsletter route as you have. But at least it still offers you an avenue to connect with your fans, to connect with other people, to be creative in a way that doesn't make you fully, you know, enslaved by a feed that can be incredibly addictive.
Totally. I appreciate that, Dylan.
I want to talk more about the future near the end, but before we get there, let's talk about the Snowman Race, because I reread your article on Outside, and this is, of course, a good extension of talking about your running and stuff. I mean, first, I guess a couple of years ago, I had Luke Nelson and Nate Bender on after they had done it. So there's at least some context here with the listeners. But for those who don't know, maybe just explain a little bit about the Snowman Race and how you came to participate this year.
Yeah. So the Snowman Race is a stage race, 5 days, 110 miles, which doesn't sound big, but it is. In Bhutan. Bhutan is a country. It's next to Nepal, under Tibet or China. And it's this incredible country. So essentially the king of Bhutan, who's 44 years old, he came up with this idea, call it 5 years ago. And then, they had a running in 2022 and then one in 2024. And his idea was to invite trail runners, international trail runners, to compete against his country's best. And holy shit, they're such good runners. Like, the Bhutanese destroyed everyone, basically. I mean, Rosanna Buchner from Germany won the women's race. But the whole premise is the king wanted to invite people to see the impacts of climate change in his country. And to do so, it had to have been on foot, because we were running this historic trekking route. That's where the name comes from, the Snowman route. And we're talking like the heart of the Himalayas. Like, I could see the Tibetan border, where the high point was 18,000 feet. And we witnessed these glaciers that are just melting. And it was so scary. And the deal with these glaciers is Bhutan's people who live down valley of these glaciers are at risk of catastrophic flooding when the glaciers melt into a lake. If the lake overflows or breaks the moraine dam that's holding it, it produces catastrophic flooding. Like people will die.
That's the GLOF phenomenon that you talk about in the article.
It's called GLOF, glacier lake outburst flood. And so we ran through a valley that's at like highest risk that experienced a GLOF in 94, and 21 people died. And like where we were running, like in kind of the heart of it, it takes like 20 days to trek to. And we got there, in 3 days. It's just the beauty of trail running.
Yep.
So it fully wrecked me. I got last place. I was 13 hours behind Rosanna. I am not good at high altitude.
A narrow margin of defeat. Only 13 hours behind Rosanna.
I actually just had Kelly Halpin out of Jackson Hole. She's amazing, in town last night. We did an event at La Sportiva where we showed a slideshow. So just talked about it a lot. And yeah, it changed us, man. The Bhutanese, they're super Buddhist, so much praying for the mountains, so much respect for land.
Talk about the gross national happiness phenomenon.
Yeah, so Bhutan became somewhat renowned for this. I'm guessing maybe in like the 2000s, but it's been known that Bhutan recognizes happiness over product. Like Bhutanese people are not consumers. Like they are so dialed with what they have. And honestly, the vibes were immaculate. Like people are happy and people have not a lot. Like not a lot. Like no one's getting boxes after boxes. Like people are living a lot off the land. One of my dear friends, Lecky, comes from a family of yak herders. And he makes his money harvesting cordyceps fungus, which he sells to Chinese buyers because it's like expensive, and he paid his way through college that way. And the problem is like these cordyceps and the yaks, like all of these lifestyles are being impacted by climate change greatly. And so it's just super unfair. You know, people who are living so close to the earth, in my opinion, like super nobly, like living outside, you know, there's no heat in Bhutan. Like only like really nice buildings or hotels have centralized heat, and it's in the Himalayas. Like it's freezing.
Yeah.
and people are, you know, there's no furniture. Like we were staying in a village in Laya, and like people don't have furniture. Like it's just, it's so different from our modern lifestyles, and people are stoked. They're happy. Yeah. They got what they have as long as they have food and family and a lot of dance. So yeah, I think Bhutan, because we were invited by the government officials, and they did say they're somewhat moving away from the idea of gross national happiness because it's just like almost too clickbaity for them.
Uh-huh.
And they have struggled with young people leaving Bhutan to go get work in like Australia. And so because they were hit pretty hard by COVID and tourism stopping, because tourism is a big economic stream for them. So yeah, it's interesting. They're definitely going through a time of change, but
was there anything, I mean, to me, when you read the article, you can tell it was massively impactful trip for you. And there's some fun embedded videos in there, like where your shoes are completely frozen, waking up at like 17,000 feet. But, you know, there's a certain level of misery attached to this certain level of like life-changing experience, which is of course why all our most profound experiences happen as human beings. But to me, it felt like the perfect collision of things for Clare Gallagher, you know, like a hard, adventurous run with like climate advocacy. Did it stir any new ideas in you about like things that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I felt really, really peaceful around the Bhutanese friends I made because they just lead by such an example. Like reverence is such a part of their everyday life. Reverence for each other, reverence for their animals, reverence for the mountains. Like every single pass we cross, the Bhutanese were praying. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, We're praying to the local mountain gods, to the local deities. We're thanking them for safe passage. And that is like, has been, I think about it every day. Like I'm trying to incorporate that type of reverence in my life for the land I live on.
Dude, so am I.
Let's go.
What a powerful, I just wrote that down. Just the word reverence. Like I haven't intentionally downloaded that into my daily practice now, but that's exactly like, that's a powerful word. Right. And if you can incorporate reverence into your life, like it's a great way to just, you know, quote unquote, gratitude has become kind of cliche. You know, reverence feels like, I don't know, almost like a more profound version of gratitude. You know?
And there's, I think, maybe a little more awe and tied into reverence, like awe for the fact that we just happen to be alive on this planet at this time. Like it's a beautiful thing. It's a miracle. And our planet is still so beautiful. There's so much to protect. I feel pretty optimistic about life. Even though I witnessed like a lot of scary realities. And yeah, if anything, I feel like I'm like unlearning everything I thought I knew. Like I thought I like understood some stuff like 5 years ago, and I'm like, I don't know anything. Like,
right.
I gotta be like praying for the land, reading more poetry, writing more, like laughing, being
Have
grateful.
you ever read David Foster Wallace's commencement address at, I think it was Kenyon College, where he talks about worship? I'm actually trying to pull the quote up on my computer right now, but it feels relevant to our conversation here, in that effectively he's saying, like, in life, you have to worship something. And if it's not like these beautiful experiences and standing on the top of a pass and like actually praying to the quote unquote gods or spirits or whatever amazing feeling we have there, you're going to worship something else. And it's probably going to be like money or attention or your career or, you know, any number of these other frivolous uniforms we wear to try and feel something about ourselves in the world. Anyway, I wish I could find the exact quote here because it's quite powerful. Maybe I'll link to it in the show notes afterwards.
I feel like you nailed it, Dylan.
Yeah.
What made you want to incorporate?
So I went and did this retreat at the end of the year. I had a good year, but a rough year in 2024.
Okay.
Just like was pushing myself beyond any healthy level and beyond
with work.
With work.
2.5-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Is this like, why you took the tech break in November?
Yes. Well, it was in December.
Okay.
And I mean, frankly, you just have to. It's part of the rules of the retreat that I went to. But it was so nice to just hand my phone in for a week and be disconnected from the incessant just pressure to feel like I need to be doing something using that phone, whether it's on my email or on social media or, you know, staying in touch with friends and family and things like that. It's just a very liberating thing. And you realize how much it contributes to the feeling of my life is slipping away and passing me by, or it's like on fast forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when you disconnect from the internet for a bit, your life slows way the bleep down in a way that feels amazing. Yeah.
Totally. What was the retreat?
It was called the Hoffman Process. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
I'll tell you about it some other time.
Okay.
It was incredible though. Like I needed it desperately. Wow. And it was incredible. But part of it was, at least part of the value of it for me was like really coming to find the reverence of what I already have. You know, I'm the type of person that is always unsatisfied, chasing more, moving the goalposts, etc. And that is a recipe for a miserable existence. Right. But if you can stop at the top of a pass and pray to the gods of what is right here, that's happiness in life, isn't it?
Totally. It gives me chills.
Look at us. We're changing the world here on a podcast.
I sense you have really, really nice energy. I mean, you always have. And I know you've always been like such a go-getter. So I commend you for making the time for that. And like knowing that you needed a bit of a reset. Yeah.
No, it was, like I said, massively necessary. I would recommend it to anybody. But it reminds me that we need to talk about your podcast before we close down here.
Okay.
Pivoting from, you know, like
so more
finding our inner purpose to producing digital content for people.
Yeah.
No, tell me about it because it was hilarious. Like this is part of the thing. I texted you. I was like, "Hey, dude." Well, first I texted you saying, "Hey, we should do a pod again." And you're like, "Yeah, I'm going to Bhutan." And then you came back and it was like, you know, and then I saw that post, I think from Abby or something, like that you guys were starting a podcast. So I texted you, I said, "Hey, we got to do a podcast so we can promote your new show." And it was like a 90-second trailer where Abby says something like, the podcast world is filled with a bunch of bros like spreading misinformation. I was like, yeah, guilty. It's like, felt like a personal attack.
Oh my God.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm obviously kidding.
I literally asked her, I was like, you're not talking about Debo. No. Debo's my homie. And she was like, no. It was just like it's a vibe. She's a vibe she's talking about.
I obviously didn't take any personal offense. Yeah. I'm just joking. But then hilariously, like whatever, a week later, it was like, hey guys, false start because your clip went viral. Everybody wanted to know where the podcast was. And then it was like, hey, we had to press pause. We're not starting yet. So
dude,
tell us about catching up with Claire and Abby, the new hit running podcast.
Funny. So Abby Levine is a dear friend. We ran together at Princeton. We've lived together, not together. We'd probably strangle each other. But we've lived in the town of Boulder together for almost a decade now. We're basically like sisters, and she's like, we got to do a podcast like 5 years ago. And I'm like, hard no. No. And then now, so over the past few years, since I've been disconnected from like the more frequent updates of our sport, she fills me in on runs. Like, I desperately want to know, I'm looking up the results and watching all the big races still, because like, how can you not? But the, the minutiae, I'm like, who's this young person? Like, I've never heard. And she's just telling me on runs. And so all these other women we're running with, they're like, just basically listening to Claire and Abby FM. And we're like, sorry. They're like, oh my God, Claire, how do you not know this? Like, you're so behind. And so eventually I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll do it, because Abby, to her credit, is doing 99% of the work. I genuinely had a great time. So we like recorded one show, and it's genuinely fun. It feels creative, and I'm stoked on running.
So when is the first episode coming out?
Well, there's just a bit of some, let's say, it doesn't have anything to do with me, but Abby is an editor at Outside Run, and she's just working on some support stuff.
Okay. You need not say anymore. I don't want you to, needlessly incriminate yourself or your co-hosts here, but
no, we are fully good. Like everything's honestly really good. And it's sad that we have to delay. Like, I had like a couple texts this morning of like, yo, where's my pod? I'm running out of pods. And so I'm like, people are so supportive. I'm like, wait, really? Like, we talked for 90 seconds and people are stoked. It's actually super kind. So thank you, Debo. We'll be out.
I think the lesson there too, Claire, is that you should write more often too. People want to hear from you. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'll make sure to include a link to your newsletter in the show notes here. Do you remember when I tried to persuade you to start a podcast like 4 or 5 years ago?
I do. And I mean, that was kind of like, and I really thought about that, because I'm like, okay, like, we've been homies forever, and I love free trail, and it just didn't feel right. I think it took like being in person with this woman like all the time, and her breathing down my neck of why this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And then being like really inspired by her journalism ethics. Like, she's a phenomenal writer.
She really is. Abby's been doing great stuff. Yeah.
And she knows running. Like, she's like you. She's a huge sports fan. Like, it drives me crazy. Like, she's so obsessed with Boston sports. I'm like, we are not talking about Boston sports on this running podcast.
Not talking about the Patriots here, Abby.
And so it's cool. I'm like, I'm a fan of her knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah, thanks, Debo.
I mean, this maybe brings everything full circle too, in that there's a difference between the long form and the short form stuff. And there is a different energy to either creating or listening to a podcast, or creating or reading a newsletter, as opposed to just mindlessly scrolling on a social media platform. And yeah, like, as humans, we do want to be informed. We do want to be entertained. And there's good ways to do that. There's bad ways to do that. I'm glad to see you doing this. And I think over time it can become a great platform for you to not only talk about running and what you're doing and allow your fans to stay more connected with Clare Gallagher, but also to talk about the stuff that you're passionate about too. So
thanks,
anyway,
Hugo.
that's why I tried to get you to make a podcast 5 years ago. So I'm taking all the credit for it.
I mean, your network is, you didn't need me. You did not need me. It's a great network. I love the Women's Pod.
Yeah.
And obviously yours.
So we can start winding down, but holy smokes, is it always fun to get together and chit chat. But you teased earlier, just kind of like looking forward, and I'd love to take it in two parts. Number one, you said, you know, eventually you want to kind of like have your life's work be associated with what you're passionate about, with climate advocacy, etc. So maybe answer that first, and then maybe we'll talk about running and close down. So what's ahead for you after grad school?
I also want to know what you're up to. So, yeah, I don't know yet because I have 2 to 3 years left, and that's like every grad student's kind of the way it goes. But yeah, I think I'm more specifically stoked on conservation. Like I am transitioning almost away from the vague nebulous term of like climate, because I think it's been somewhat corporatized in America, especially, whereas like I care about land, about water, about clean air, animals, like dirt, like undeveloped land. And so if I hope to get a job protecting those parts of our world.
What kind of jobs, like, well, we don't need to get into it, but that's amazing. I'm personally curious, like, yeah, like you have to, we've sort of talked a little bit about, you know, the friction that the free markets and corporations, like everybody's got to make a living, right? And so I don't know if there's anything that like is more specific about how you might apply your skills. I'm at least be personally interested.
Yeah, I will be too when I'm looking for jobs. But yeah, I think there's a lot of incredible nonprofits that are global or US based that are just working their tails off with really smart people of trying to protect land and water and the people who are doing the most work. So all right. Well, no pressure. Just first things first, get your education done and then go save the world in whatever capacity that might look like. So finishing with your running, tell me what you have going on. What are you excited about for 2025? Do you have goals at this point? Yeah, I ever since I heard that Courtney and Katie were going to be at UTMB this year, I'm like, holy shit, I cannot miss this. I'm like, I got to get my ass there. Like, this is insane. This is so insane. Like, gosh, women's trail running is just so, I feel like it's been so fun to be a fan of this sport, and I want to get my body back in it and my soul. So I'll be at Desert Rats in Fruita, Colorado, which is I'll do the 100K in April and then go from there. Yeah, that's a qualifier. So
let's go.
Yeah. Man. It's trying to get fit, dude. Training starts tomorrow.
Training starts tomorrow. Man, that UTMB trophy would really fill out your trophy cabinet and your resume in a very special way.
I want to be clear that I am not saying I'm going to compete with Katie and Courtney. I would like to be there, though.
Don't sell yourself short, Claire. You're an all-time ledge. So,
what about you, dude?
Oh, you know, I'm making like my 15th attempt at a comeback.
You're always in it,
man. I'm actually, we're going to Tarawera to do our trailgating stuff. And I'm going to do the 50K there, which will be fun.
Yes.
And then I'm going to do Chuckanut. And that's one of those races I've never gotten around to doing. So I'm excited about that. My plan is to probably do the Maxi race, which is, I think, the very beginning of June.
Sweet.
And then the summer is like pretty much deleted based on
work, going
to every single race on the planet and sitting around and talking. But it's a blessed life. It's a fantastic career. And I am in reverence of my, privilege that I'm able to do that. So
That's so
That's
special.
me.
Will you, Ryan, and Harms and Rhodes go to Tarawera?
No, just
Okay.
me and Rye.
Okay,
And
cool.
Corinne is coming to that one too. And
Great.
it's increasingly we're trying to figure out how to travel as a family. We love to do it as much as we can, but it just becomes a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult. So we try and, find the right times and places to do that. So
Yeah. Well, as a non-parent, I commend you. And I think it's really cool. It's like life is cool. Like your little boy is sweet and it's awesome just to be doing it live. So
it's the best. Hey, Claire, so fun to catch up. You're the best.
Thanks, Steve-O.
I've missed chatting, and this felt like a great way to just get back together and, hear what's going on in your life. And as always, I'm just a big, big fan, big admirer, and I appreciate you carving out an hour to chit chat with me.
Right back at you. Thank you. And reverence.
Reverence.
Yeah.